During the most sacred days of the Christian calendar, Israeli authorities prevented the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem and the custodian of the Holy Land from entering the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. On Palm Sunday, which commemorates the entry of Jesus Christ into Jerusalem, access was restricted, clergy were delayed, worship was obstructed. This was not an administrative issue, it was a demonstration of control, a signal about who's permitted to access sacred space and who is not. In the days leading up to this, Benjamin Netanyahu offered a revealing insight. Quoting the historian Will Durant, he said, "Jesus Christ has no advantage over Genghis Khan." This is not a stray remark, it is a declaration of values. Because in the New Testament, Christ doesn't conquer, he redeems. He doesn't rule through fear, he calls through truth. At the moment of his execution, he doesn't call for revenge, he says, "Lord, forgive them." This is not weakness, it is moral authority. And in Islam, Isa ibn Maryam, Isa, the son of Mary, is honored as a prophet of mercy. He heals, he restores, he calls to righteousness. His message, completed by Muhammad, peace be upon them both, binds justice to mercy and strength to responsibility. In both Christianity and Islam, Jesus represents the same principle, not conquest, but conscience, not domination, but dignity, not annihilation, but life. Netanyahu rejects this framework. Instead, he elevates Genghis Khan. History records what that means. The Mongol campaigns were not merely wars, they were campaigns of obliteration. Cities that had stood for centuries, Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, Nishapur, were not captured, they were erased. When Bukhara fell, its people were driven from their homes, its streets emptied, its buildings torched, the great mosque desecrated, the city left hollow. In Merv, the killing didn't stop. Day after day, men were executed, women slaughtered, children cut down. Chroniclers describe such vast numbers of dead that counting them became impossible. An entire population systematically wiped out. In Nishapur, after the death of a Mongol prince, revenge became policy. The city was surrounded, then emptied, then exterminated. Men, women, children, even animals killed. Nothing left alive, nothing left to return to. The Persian historian Al-Juwayni captured the pattern with chilling clarity. They came, they sapped, they burned, they slew, they plundered, and they departed. This was not incidental brutality, it was doctrine, warfare designed not merely to defeat armies, but to erase societies. If Genghis Khan built this machinery of terror, his grandson Hulagu Khan refined it into civilizational destruction. In 1258, during the siege of Baghdad, one of the greatest intellectual capitals in human history, was devastated. Bayt al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom, a repository of centuries of knowledge, was destroyed. Manuscripts were cast into the Tigris in such a volume that chroniclers describe its waters darkened with ink and thickened with blood. The Abbasid Caliphate collapsed in days. A civilization was not merely conquered, it was extinguished. It's here that the historical echo becomes impossible to ignore. The logic that underpinned those campaigns, the belief that overwhelming force can break a people, that devastation can secure submission, did not disappear with the Mongols. It re-emerges, articulated in modern ideological form in the writings of Ze'ev Jabotinsky. Netanyahu's political lineage traces directly to Jabotinsky through the revisionist movement later embodied in Herut and ultimately in Likud. This is not a distant intellectual echo, it is a direct inheritance. In his 1923 essay, The Iron Wall, Jabotinsky wrote with stark clarity that every indigenous people will resist alien settlers, that a voluntary agreement is unattainable, and that colonization must therefore proceed behind an iron wall which the native population cannot breach. Here, force is not a last resort, it is the foundation. From this doctrine emerged militant organizations such as the Irgun, Lehi and the Haganah, armed groups whose campaigns left a trail of bombings, expulsions at gunpoint, and massacres that carved terror into the landscape. Villages emptied overnight, families driven from their homes or killed where they stood, entire communities erased, their presence reduced to memory. In the aftermath of the Nakba, these militias formed the nucleus of what would become the Israeli army. And that logic continues. In Gaza, it finds its cruelest expression, a strip of land barely 365 square kilometers, one of the most densely populated places on earth, subjected to destruction on a scale that strains comprehension. Massive explosive force unleashed on a trapped civilian population, bunker-busting bombs dropped on makeshift tents, death delivered in every form, bombs, fire, sniper rounds, disease, hunger, thirst. Whole families erased from the civil registry, from grandparents to grandchild, children mutilated, limbs severed in numbers that shock even hardened observers of war. A living city turned into a graveyard of concrete and ash. Violence, not merely as a means, but as an end in itself. Look closely and you see it, the unmistakable footprints of Genghis Khan and his hordes. And yet the greatest irony remains. Netanyahu presents himself as the defender of Western civilization against barbarism, while openly affirming a philosophy that places him firmly on the side of the most ruthless barbarians in human history. More than 20 years ago, Netanyahu was one of the loudest voices pushing the US to invade Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction, urgency, necessity, topple Baghdad, he said. And the war came, and with it, the destruction of a capital that had already once been reduced to ruin by Hulagu Khan. History didn't just echo, it repeated. And today, the pattern returns. Netanyahu again pushing Washington toward war, this time Iran, not just a country, a civilization. Tehran, Isfahan, Mashhad, cities that have stood for centuries. And the objective, in Trump's own words, to leave Iran in the Stone Age. Think about that. The language is not new, it is familiar, it is ancient. It's the language of annihilation, the language of Genghis Khan. But the truth is this, even the comparison to Genghis Khan grants Netanyahu too much. Genghis Khan wielded power that was his own after all. He forged it, he commanded it, he imposed it across continents. Netanyahu doesn't. His power is sustained militarily, financially, diplomatically by the US. He's not Genghis Khan. He is a derivative of power, not its source, a man who postures as a king while operating as a client. He may speak in the language of domination, invoke the imagery of conquest, and cloak himself in the rhetoric of civilizational struggle. But the reality is far smaller. He is no Genghis Khan. He is a thug with illusions of grandeur. The sword he brandishes is borrowed. It's not his own. Take it away, and there is nothing left.